Have you ever started a morning routine thinking it is healthy, only to discover later that your body has been paying a hidden price? And have you ever wondered why some habits feel harmless because everyone does them, yet the consequences appear years later when you least expect it? Welcome back to the channel. Today we are going to talk about a kind of warning that sounds dramatic on the surface, but becomes deeply practical when you look at it through the lens of cause and effect. Not superstition, not fear marketing, just karma in the simplest sense. Repeated causes create predictable consequences. The heart is not only an organ, it is also a symbol of how we live. When we rush, the heart learns rush. When we worry, the heart learns tension. When we ignore signals, the heart learns to shout louder. This story is not here to diagnose you, and it is not here to replace a professional. It is here to give you a mirror, because the morning is where many people plant the seeds of their whole day, and the whole day is where many people plant the seeds of their whole life. If you change one small morning cause, you may change a chain of consequences that would otherwise grow quietly for years. The story begins with a man named Daniel, a cardiologist with a reputation for being calm in emergencies. He was not the kind of doctor who performed worry to look serious. He moved slowly, spoke clearly, and made decisions without panic. Nurses liked working with him because he did not treat the hospital like a stage. Patients trusted him because his presence felt clean. But what made Daniel different was not only his skill. It was his way of watching patterns. He did not only treat events, he studied causes. He had been practicing medicine long enough to notice a strange rhythm. So many patients would sit in front of him and describe a life that sounded normal. They were not reckless. They were not doing obviously extreme things. Many of them even thought they were living responsibly. Yet their blood pressure was high. Their stress hormones were always running. Their sleep was thin. Their heart rhythms were irregular. And their bodies were aging faster than their calendars. And the most confusing part was this. When Daniel asked about diet, they often gave decent answers. When he asked about exercise, some were active, some were not. Not even the active ones had problems. When he asked about family history, yes, some had risk, but not all. Something else was happening. Something quieter. Something hidden inside routine. Daniel started asking a different kind of question. Not what do you do in crisis, but what do you do first thing in the morning? At first, patients laughed. They thought it was irrelevant. But Daniel kept asking, because he had a suspicion that the first hour of the day was creating a daily stress imprint on the heart, not just from one dramatic habit, but from a cluster of small behaviors that all pointed in the same direction. Tension, dehydration, stimulant spikes, and emotional shock before the body fully wakes. He noticed a repeating confession. People would wake up and immediately grab their phone. Before the body even had time to stretch, before the lungs took a deep, clean breath, before the nervous system settled into the day, they would flood their brain with notification, headlines, arguments, drama, and demands. They would scroll while still half asleep. They would read messages that triggered fear. They would jump into work problems while their heart was still in its most sensitive transition state. Then they would add something else. They would rush caffeine into an empty stomach. Strong coffee, energy drinks, pre-workout stimulants. They would do it fast, almost like a ritual of survival. They would say, "I cannot function without it." But Daniel knew the body hears that sentence differently. The body hears it as, "I begin my day by forcing myself." Then, on top of that, many people would skip water. They would delay hydration. They would delay real nourishment. They would delay gentle movement. They would delay sunlight. They would delay calm. They would delay presence. The body would begin the day already behind, already dry, already stressed, already jumping. If you want to understand why this matters, imagine the heart as a worker that never gets to clock in peacefully. Instead of waking, stretching, and gradually increasing activity. It gets hit with a loud alarm, then a panic meeting, then a stimulant whip, then a sprint. The heart can do it. The heart is strong. But strength is not the same as freedom from consequence. A strong heart can carry abuse for years before it finally demands payment. So Daniel began warning patients about a morning pattern. He did not describe it as one magic villain. He described it as a sequence that many people do without realizing the cumulative cost. He told them, if you begin every day by shocking your nervous system, you are training your cardiovascular system to live in a constant state of emergency. Patients would ask him, are you saying my phone is hurting my heart? Daniel would answer carefully, not directly, not as a simplistic claim. He would say, your body is not only affected by what you eat, it is affected by how you live inside your mind. The phone is not a demon, but the way you use it can become a daily stress ritual. The heart is sensitive to stress. Stress is not only an emotion, it is a chemical storm. And if you create that storm every morning, the heart has to swim in it every morning. This is where the story becomes spiritual. Not because it leaves science behind, but because it reveals the mind as the first cause. In Buddhist language, the mind is the leader. If the mind starts the day with craving and ignorance, the body follows. Craving for stimulation, aversion to discomfort, ignorance of consequences. That trio is a perfect recipe for suffering. Now let me introduce you to someone who made this lesson painfully real. Her name was Melissa. She was in her mid-30s, busy, competent, and admired for being productive. She worked in a competitive field, the kind of job where people brag about sleeping for hours as if it is a medal. Melissa believed discipline meant pushing. She believed rest was weakness. She believed anxiety was just ambition. Her morning routine looked impressive on the surface. She woke early. She answered emails immediately. She managed her team before most people opened their eyes. She drank strong coffee as if it was oxygen. She skipped breakfast because she said it slowed her down. She told herself she would eat later. She checked headlines because she wanted to stay informed. She checked social media because she wanted to stay connected. She checked messages because she feared missing something. She did not realize she was beginning every morning by teaching her nervous system to panic. It worked for years. That is how these patterns trick people. They work until they do not. Melissa began noticing subtle symptoms. Heart pounding sometimes for no clear reason. A tight chest when she climbed stairs. Waking up tired even after sleep. Random dizziness. Irritability that felt out of proportion. Then, one day, while she was sitting at her desk, her heart began racing in a way that frightened her. Not the normal fast beat from stress, but a chaotic feeling that made her feel as if something was wrong. She went to the emergency room. Tests were done. The doctors told her she was not having a heart attack, but they also told her something that did not comfort her. Your body is under strain. Your blood pressure is high. Your stress markers are elevated. Your sleep is poor. Your nervous system is overactivated. Melissa said, I work hard. That is normal. The doctor said, normal does not mean harmless. A week later she found herself in Daniel's office. Daniel listened, looked at her readings, asked about family history, asked about sleep, asked about stress, asked about movement, and then asked the question she did not expect. What do you do in the first hour after you wake? Melissa answered confidently, I am productive. Daniel nodded. Then he asked again, what exactly do you do? Melissa described it. Phone, emails, news, coffee, no water, no breakfast, no pause. Daniel leaned back and said something that Melissa would later repeat to herself like a mantra. You are waking your heart up with a fire alarm every day. Melissa laughed nervously. She said, I thought coffee was healthy. Everyone does this. Daniel said, many people do many things. That does not protect them. Your body has been tolerating it. But tolerance is not the same as safety. Melissa asked, "So what should I do?" Daniel did not give her a complicated plan. He gave her a principle. Start your day in a way that does not teach your nervous system to panic. Then he explained the idea in a way she could not forget. The heart follows the nervous system. The nervous system follows the mind. The mind follows habit. If you want a different body, you need different habits. If you want different habits, you need awareness. Awareness is the first medicine. Melissa left that appointment feeling offended and relieved at the same time. Offended because she did not like being told her routine was harming her. Relieved because for the first time, someone gave her a clear place to intervene. Not an expensive supplement. Not an extreme program. 1 hour in the morning. That night, Melissa could not sleep well. She kept thinking about the phrase fire alarm. She realized her mornings felt exactly like that. Loud, reactive, demanding. She had been living as if every day began in crisis. Even when it did not, she decided to try an experiment for 2 weeks. Not because she suddenly became spiritual, but because fear finally made her humble. People often become humble when the body speaks loudly. The body does not care about your pride. On the first morning, she woke up and reached for her phone like always. Her hand hovered. Then she remembered the warning. She put the phone down. Her mind immediately panicked. What if something happened? What if I miss an email? What if I lose an opportunity? She realized something shocking. The fear was not about reality. It was about addiction to control. So she did something else instead. She sat on the edge of the bed and took 10 slow breaths. Not fancy meditation, just breathing. Then she walked to the kitchen and drank water. A full glass. Slowly. Then she stood by a window and let daylight touch her face for a minute. Then she stretched gently. Then she ate something small. Not a perfect breakfast, just nourishment. Only after that did she look at her phone. The first day felt strange, like being in a new country where the language is unfamiliar. The second day felt slightly easier. By the 5th day, she noticed something. Her heart felt calmer in the morning. Her mind was still busy, but it was not sprinting. The day felt less like a chase. She began to see a deeper pattern. The phone was not the only issue. The issue was the quality of attention she started the day with. When she started with reaction, her whole day stayed reactive. When she started with presence, her whole day became more intentional. Presence is not just a spiritual word. It is a physiological state. When you are present, your breathing is deeper, your shoulders loosen, your jaw soften. Your heart does not need to race to prepare for a threat that does not exist. Now the story could end here as a simple wellness lesson. But there is more. Because the most important part is not what she changed. It is what changing revealed. Melissa began to notice how often she used work as a way to avoid her feelings. The morning rush prevented her from feeling fear. It prevented her from feeling loneliness. It prevented her from feeling the quiet sadness she carried about not living the life she once imagined. Productivity was her drug. If she stayed busy, she did not have to listen to the deeper ache. When she slowed the morning down, the ache became audible. At first, she hated it. She thought the new routine was making her worse because she felt emotional. But Daniel had told her something that now made sense. When you stop shocking your system, you start hearing the signals you have been drowning out. So she stayed with it. She began using that first hour not only to protect her heart, but to train her mind. She would breathe, drink water, stretch, and then sit for a few minutes with no input. No news, no argument, no scrolling. Just quiet. In that quiet, she saw the 3 forces that were running her life. Craving, aversion, and ignorance. Craving for validation through productivity. Aversion to discomfort and uncertainty. Ignorance of the long-term consequences of her daily habits. She did not cure these forces overnight, but she began to see them. Seeing is the beginning of wisdom. Weeks passed. Melissa's follow-up appointment with Daniel showed improvement, not because she became a different person, but because she stopped beginning every day by creating a chemical emergency. Daniel told her, "This is what I mean by risk. Many people do not realize their morning routine is a daily stress test. You do not need to live inside a stress test every day." Melissa asked him, "Why do so many people do it?" Daniel answered, "Because the consequences are delayed. People think what hurts them must hurt immediately. But the body keeps score quietly. That is karma. Delayed consequence does not mean no consequence." That line hit Melissa deeply. She realized karma is not only spiritual, it is biological. The body is cause and effect. Now let us go deeper, because some of you listening might be thinking, "I do not have chest pain. I am young. I am fine. I can do whatever." Maybe you can, for now. But the lesson is not fear. The lesson is awareness. The morning is where you decide whether your mind will lead your body, or whether the world will lead your mind. If the world leads your mind, the world will begin your day with conflict, comparison, fear, and pressure. If your mind leads your body, you begin with breath, nourishment, and intention. Then you meet the world with more stability. This is why Buddhist wisdom keeps returning to the mind, because the mind is where suffering begins, and the mind is where suffering can end. Detachment does not mean you stop caring about work or goals. Detachment means you stop treating every notification as a threat to your identity. Detachment means you stop letting a phone decide your heart rate. Detachment means you stop letting urgency become your personality. The practical translation is simple. Do not let the first hour of your day be an assault on your nervous system. Some people hear this and feel guilty. They think, "I have been doing it wrong." That guilt is not helpful. Guilt is just another stress spike. The better approach is compassion and discipline. You do not shame yourself into health. You train yourself into health. If you want to treat this as a spiritual practice, here is how the heart of it works. When you wake up, you have a choice. You can begin with craving, which says, "Give me stimulation now." You can begin with aversion, which says, "I cannot tolerate silence." Or you can begin with wisdom, which says, "Let me begin with what supports life." Wisdom often looks boring. Water, breath, light, gentle movement. I calm mind. But boring is sometimes the doorway to freedom, because so much suffering is created by constant chasing. Melissa began sharing her new routine with co-workers. Some laughed. Some said it was too soft. Some said it was unrealistic. But one co-worker, a young man named Theo, listened quietly and tried it. Theo had been waking up, drinking energy drinks, and diving into social media arguments. He thought it was normal. 2 weeks after he changed his morning, he told Melissa something that sounded small, but was actually huge. "I do not feel like I start my day already angry anymore." Anger is also a cardiovascular burden. Not because anger is evil, but because chronic anger keeps the body in fight mode. Fight mode is a short-term survival tool, not a healthy lifestyle. This is another karmic layer. Your emotional habits become physical habits. Your physical habits reinforce emotional habits. This loop is why mindfulness is not just spiritual. It is practical self-protection. Now I want to share something from Daniel's perspective that made this warning feel even more urgent. Daniel noticed that people wanted one villain. They wanted him to say, "This one thing is killing you." Then they wanted to remove that one thing and keep everything else. But real health, like real awakening, is rarely one thing. It is a direction. The direction is this: less shock, more steadiness, less panic, more presence, less stimulant dependence, more true energy, less reaction, more intention, less clinging, more calm. So if you are listening and you want a simple direction, not a complicated plan, here is a clean principle you can remember without turning it into anxiety. Start your morning like you want your heart to feel. If you want your heart to feel safe, do not begin with danger signals. If you want your heart to feel steady, do not begin with a sprint. If you want your heart to feel supported, do not begin with neglect. And if you want a Buddhist-style reminder, it is this: begin with right intention. A small right intention each morning can change the karma of the whole day. Melissa eventually realized the biggest gift of changing her morning routine was not lower readings. It was a new relationship with her own mind. She stopped treating herself like a machine. She stopped treating urgency like love. She began to see that she had been trying to prove her worth by exhausting herself. When she stopped doing that, she felt something she had been missing for years: dignity. Dignity is not a luxury. It is a form of inner health. Now let us land this story in your life, because you might not be Melissa, but you might have your own version of the pattern. Maybe you wake up and immediately scroll. Maybe you wake up and immediately worry. Maybe you wake up and immediately push caffeine into an empty body. Maybe you wake up and immediately rush without water, without breath, without calm. Even if you feel fine now, consider the karmic direction. You are training your nervous system. You are teaching it what morning means. You are teaching it what life feels like. You can teach it something else. You do not need perfection. You need consistency. Even a small change, a few minutes of breathing, a glass of water, a gentle stretch, a moment of light, a short pause before phone input, can begin shifting your inner chemistry. And shifting inner chemistry shifts your thoughts. And shifting thoughts shifts your choices. And shifting choices shifts your destiny. That is cause and effect. Thank you for spending this time with me. If this story made you reflect on your own mornings, share in the comments what your first hour looks like and what one small change you are willing to try. Not to impress anyone, but to protect your heart and calm your mind. Please subscribe to the channel, like the video, and stay connected. Your support helps these long conversations continue, and your comment might help someone else realize they are not weak for needing calm. They are wise for choosing it. Until next time, keep your heart compassionate, keep your mind clear, and remember that the simplest practice is often the most powerful. Start the day gently, and you may be surprised how gently life begins responding back.